that experience, just being in a market in a foreign country? I assume that you've learned some of the language. How was that whole experience of like selling stuff at a market in Vietnam?
Well, I never could get or master Vietnamese. It's a tonal language. So it's like our word oh. It means very different things. So I basically learned French, which everybody knew because they had been dominated by the French. In fact, the reason we had come into that country was because of the Indochina Wars, and Vietnam, the French were given Vietnam back after World War II, and they continued to fight they had before World War II, which was they didn't want any foreign rule. But still, the populace was fluent in French, and that's what I used. I found no problem. I found that what in those early days, kids weren't bothered. It's kind of like an unwritten rule that the children were not to be bothered. However, you could get in a taxi and they'd take you right to your home. So in Saigon, everything was known. They knew who you were. They knew where you lived. They didn't bother you. If anything, they were helpful to you. But I also had this strange man that would come and just kind of stand in between the stalls. And I couldn't decide whether he was there to protect me or whether he was there to spy on me, because the regime was set up with a ton of spies. They were all kept separate, but they all reported to Nu, which was President Diem's brother. So I didn't know whether he was a spy or whether he was there to protect me. He came every time and he left, and he never said a word to me. The stall owners were great. You know, I would trade or leave my candy bars with them, and they would kind of keep my crate so that I'd be back there next week. So I definitely found people to be incredibly wonderful.
This is your first book, right?
Yes.
How was your experience publishing a book?
Well, I feel like I'm trusting in the will of heaven too, because I had no idea exactly what I was doing, and I joined a group that was kind of helpful in that, and they had a publishing coach, and I called her when I'd finally written the book, and she said, I'm consulting with a new publishing house. Let me see if I can pitch it to them. I mean, it went so smooth that I just assume I'm meant to do this, because they said okay. And so I was off and running. In fact, some of the problem was they wanted to speed it through. So instead of taking 2 years, which is the normal book, they wanted it in 1 year. And then the other thing they did, they're experimenting with a different kind of contract. So instead of being, out of the loop in terms of your book, they give you a 50% contract. So you have 50% say in it, and royalties when they come after all the expenses have been deducted. So I found that interesting because I had control in the design for the book cover. I ended up painting it and designing it because I didn't feel that the designs I were getting really conveyed what the story was about. So my experience has been very good, but it also lends itself to you have 50% of the responsibility to market too. And that seems to take more time than writing a book. So it's critical to really pay attention to history. I think if anything else, that's my message, because we constantly repeat these things, especially with this country. I think its history lends so much to understanding what we're currently involved in.
Yeah, it's certainly true. Someone said that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself verbatim, but you can see the echoes of the past and in the present, and there's certainly a lot of parallels that you can draw in modern history, and maybe we haven't learned our lesson yet.
And also, you asked about the culture. Theirs was not so much a democracy. It was, it was kind of a mix. Ho Chi Minh had traveled around the world. He even lived in the United States, and he was studying different cultures to try to see what would work and, how he could help to form his country into something that worked for their culture, which had a socialist bent to it. Son worked for father worked for his father. And as a Buddhist, primarily Buddhist country, it didn't have the same issues that, Christian countries have. And it didn't look at things the same way. And wherever we go, we really need to understand their religion, their history, how their culture is, what they believe in, because Democracy is one thing for us, but it might mean something else and be interpreted differently in another country.
Thanks for listening to a podcast with interesting people. Please subscribe and leave a review or comment.
And support us by sharing our episodes on social media. We really appreciate it. And for more information, visit us at apodcast.com. Thanks.